It's 2 o'clock p.m. and you've got Flanger Magazine on WXOXLP, Louisville, 97.1 FM. Happy to have everybody out there with us today. We've got a little music from Robbie Basho, The Grail and the Lotus, mixed in with some sounds from Bernard Parmigiani. Definitely got a big show slated for today, and how are we doing, Ben?
Doing great. This is it's kind of another special edition of Flanger Magazine today because, as you know, out there in the States, it's the... how old is the nation coming up here tomorrow, Chris? Do you know how old it is? How many years has it been?
Well, I think what you're gonna want to do is look all the way back to 1776.
Okay, and just start from there. And
you're gonna want to count forward until 2016. Both numbers ending in 6. You're gonna get a round number. It's gonna be a multiple of 10. How many exactly years? I don't know. And if any of the listeners out there are math whizzes, or if they have calculators on their phones or something like that, we'd be happy to hear from you.
I'm going to just take a wild guess. I'm going to say it's 240 years old today, and we're just a decade away from the halfway point between
that good 250 number.
Yeah, that's going to be a real classic. That's going to be a real celebration. And if I were you, I would get together some real nice letters and you know, make sure you get some good invitations for that, because it's going to be such a big celebration. There'll be so many parties that are just going to be remembered for the rest of your life. You're going to want to have the best invitation when that comes around. But you got 10 years. So but this one I think is going to be fun as well. Anytime you hit on the 10s, that's kind of those are kind of the better birthdays.
Well, it's a great nation, and it's a young nation, and we're just getting started, I think, as a nation, defining who we are as Americans, as these United States of America. And, you know, there's a lot in the news that we're going to talk about on this eve of our nation's great day of birth and independence. And I think a topic we touched on last week was the Brexit and the possibility of a recolonialization of the UK, this time the United States invading the UK and colonizing that.
And ever since we brought this idea up, it's kind of become it's been real fodder for conversations in the capital and over across the pond. People are wondering, is the United States going to invade the greater United Kingdom? Will we invade Northern Ireland and leave Scotland alone? Or will we let them go their way with the European states? These are questions that we got to ask if we're going to take back our motherland.
And I guess it's time for the listeners to take out their tinfoil hats, and we've got a lot of driveway moments coming up on Flanger Magazine. It's 2:04, and we've got music from Robbie Basho. Stay tuned. Lots in store for today's program of Flanger Magazine on WXOXLP. And it's 2:21 p.m. You're listening to Flanger Magazine on WXOXLP 97.1 FM Louisville. We've got music from Ben Webster off of his album For the Governor, Volume 1. And do you see, I just did a little bit of a British accent there, Ben, when I said governor, because that's how it's spelled, G-U-V N-O-R. And isn't that kind of a nice touch from Mr. Webster?
And I love it. I love these accents that you throw in from time to time, especially when we're talking about Brexit and our independence from the Great Britons and those Great Britons from across the pond. They're so those mop-haired funny guys over there. Last week we were talking about Brexit, and that's kind of over and done with.
We're still talking about it,
but
though.
We're going to keep talking about it.
A lot of those radio stations, they stopped talking about Brexit and moved on to the next shiny object, the shiny news story. Mm-hmm. We're sticking with these programs.
Because this is serious business, and what's going on here.
And it's up-to-date, breaking coverage of Brexit, and we'll be getting into that more. But just for now, know that here at Flanger Magazine, you'll have all your Brexit news probably for the rest of the year. We'll be talking about Brexit.
Sure. And that's promise.
We heard from the one and only Mike Vickers, a track called Retribution off of his album A Moog for All Reasons. We heard a piece that appears on the Cambodian Cassette Archives, an anonymous piece. We heard from Bruce Hack, a track called Maybe This Song, and the Mike Sammy's Singers started things out with To Wait for Love. This is Flanger Magazine, and, the thing about this show, Ben, is we like to focus on the golden era, the golden age of music. I'm talking the late 60s, the early 70s, when the Beatles had already broken rock and roll wide open for groups like the Velvet Underground and David Bowie to step in and really transform American culture.
And those are groundbreaking bands, and that's the golden era, the late 60s, early 70s. And, that's also the golden era of film. Golden era of film, the 1970s. And it makes one wonder, what was it about those late 60s, those mid 70s that was so golden in American culture? Was it because it was coming up on the 200-year anniversary of the 4th of July? So maybe that's what it is. Every 50 years, some golden moments in time happen. And, 50 years before that, of course, we had the 1920s and the Great Depression. So, these are times of struggle, times of where you see people really just push the boundaries of what can be done on the smallest budget. And I think that's what's going to happen here in the next 10 years. We're going to see sort of a renaissance. Maybe all those Brexiters are going to come over. It's going to be another British invasion. Who knows?
Well, that would be certainly a very interesting cultural event if that did happen, a second British invasion, as it were, and we had a whole new group of mods and mop tops coming over here with their Fender Telecasters and Stratocasters, and breaking open rock and roll once again. I think it's been since the great Andy Warhol found the Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, John Cale, Doug Yule, Sterling Morrison, and Nico on that first album, Ben, until creative differences got in the middle of some of those artists. Like so many creative differences do pop up in these rock and roll stories, and I've read
with Nico. It was just Nico, we love you in the band. We love having you sing on a couple tracks here and there. Could you just maybe we would just put you in the Velvet Underground. You don't have to have your own title on the album. She said no. If I'm going to be on the album, I want my own title on the album, Velvet Underground and Nico. And they said, well, that's fine for the first time. It was kind of funny, but from now on, you're just in the band Velvet Underground. And she said, well, if that's the way it is, then we're going to have to part ways. And, in some ways, you can criticize Nico for that. And in other ways, she's always going to be remembered as that one model that had a few of her own good albums. And then, of course, it was on a seminal record, the Velvet Underground and Nico. And it started it all.
Wow, that was a great summary, Ben, and trip down through the pages of rock and roll history, and that's really what this show's all about. It's about driveway moments. It's about a look back into the past to see if the past reveals the present. History repeats itself, and here at Flanger Magazine, we're not afraid to look back in time and then to look into the present.
Sometimes I find that reading through a history book is a lot like looking into a crystal ball. Just looking into the past, you can know what's going to happen next. All you have to do is read between the lines, and before you know it, you've got yourself quite a career as somebody that tells people's and read people's palms and can read tarot cards. These are the type of things you learn from reading in between the lines, and it's very simple once you get the hang of it.
And, as so much information is declassified, we learn more about what really happened back in those crazy 60s and 70s around the time of the Vietnam War. What was going on behind the scenes. And now, of course, it was classified then, and everyone had their theories.
Yeah.
And now we get to see who was right and who was wrong. Because there's still some things that are very much classified and zipped up, and many of our listeners will know that.
People will ask, well, gosh, was Kubrick right when he wrote Full Metal Jacket? That was in the beginnings of the 80s, but before that, you had Platoon, and was Platoon was that history as we know it?
MASH.
Was MASH a little closer to Vietnam and the truth behind all that? And the truth is, it was MASH. MASH was the closest rendition of Vietnam, and of course, The Deer Hunter was wildly out of. John McCain even said that was not my experience. He left halfway through the theater. through the showing of Deer Hunter. He was in. He had some stories to tell.
Like so many of the artists of that era, Kubrick was just another one of these drug casualties. He was overly imaginative, and he dabbled a little too heavily in the hallucinogenics, and people tried to develop greater meanings from his work, interpret things. They try to notice certain suggestions, but it's really just a lot of wild imagination, only spurned and clouded by hardcore hallucinogenic drugs.
And that continued all the way up until his death during the filming of during the wrap up and the editing of his final film, of course, starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, another drug hallucinatory dream of going to a house full of people with masks on. It just didn't make a lick of sense, but that's why Kubrick was one of the masters.
And you're talking about the great film Eyes Wide Shut.
Yes.
And it's great to throw in the trash because it's certainly a unfortunate and senseless, meaningless compilation of imagery that just doesn't add up. And you're listening to Flanger Magazine on WXOX-LP. It's 2:40. How about that? 20 minutes before 3 p.m. And at that time, we'll know whether or not we're going to be continuing on for the 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock music hour. And that's all dependent on whether we get the red light or the green light. We always get the green light, but you never know. Management could come in and yank us out of the studio, and we are touching on some pretty hot-button issues, some conspiracy theories.
Certainly.
Declassified information. We want to touch on the National Rifle Association. That's always a controversial group that a lot of people have different thoughts about. We don't have any direction or thoughts or positions or political stances.
But when something is in the news, you got to tackle it no matter how uncomfortable you may be or how uncomfortable the issue may make you feel. Now, bring us up to date here, Chris. What has happened with the NRA lately?
Well, followers of our Instagram feed will know that we were always going to tackle this issue. It's been in the works for a little while, but the National Rifle Association is calling for the resignation of Katie Couric, and actually I think it's the firing by Yahoo of the well-known news anchor. We think that she's just a fine news anchor, but then again, if you get in the crosshairs of the NRA, you never know, what kind of political upsurging. It's just an interesting issue, Ben, and will she, won't she? It's kind of one of those.
Okay, so what's happened? What has she done wrong? How has she wronged the NRA?
I'm not really sure. It probably has to do with...
Well, I'm seeing something about a documentary she was involved with, and maybe some selective editing. Selective editing, it's something we do here at Flanger Magazine. It's something everybody with artistic license has the freedom to do. And in a country like this, that's one of the freedoms bestowed upon us by our founders and some of the wise old men that started this country. And I feel like Katie Couric just took them at their word and did what they would have done.
Well, it's interesting from a constitutional perspective. You've got the First Amendment, right? You've got the Second Amendment. They're the first two up there, and are they at odds in this case?
Now, number one comes before number two, as far as I can tell. So freedom of speech, I think that trumps the NRA's ability. And here's the other thing. Katie Couric is America's sweetheart, and everybody knows that. And everybody knows that I'm just not going to turn on America's sweethearts, no matter who they might be. It might be Julia Roberts, star of the film America's Sweetheart, and she's a great actress. And of course, I have said some less than complimentary things about her in the past, but I'm not going to take away her title as America's Sweetheart, and I'm not going to call for her to get fired off a film. Okay, now this is Katie's bread and butter. This is how she brings home the bacon, and for callers to get her fired, that's not fair.
If anything, she should get a much better job working over at Yahoo.
That just doesn't seem very good. She used to be
she deserves
anchor
far
over
better.
At NBC.
ABC, NBC, one of the big news networks. Maybe get her a Netflix deal. That would be, great for her.
Sure.
So, and here we are. We said we weren't going to take a stance, and we're coming out pro Katie on this. She should not only keep her job, but she should get a better promotion job. Get a better job. If she gets fired, hopefully some of the ABCs, NBCs, Foxes of the world step in and swoop in and capitalize on this great talent who is one of America's sweethearts. And there's some debate as to where she stands against the great Julia Roberts on that list. In Ben's mind, that is. I hear that.
These are two women that have always been referred to as America's sweethearts, and that's not something I made up, and that's not something that I'm just coming up with. That's something that's been said hundreds of thousands of times in the media, and of course Katie Couric. They've said it less and less about her over the years, and maybe since she's been losing job after job, it is difficult to be called a sweetheart when everybody keeps firing you. So that's unfortunate, but like we said, so keep up the good work, Katie, and don't let the NRA guys keep you down, and maybe find a better job.
All right. Well, you're listening to Flanger Magazine on WXOXLP Louisville. We've got music right now from a group called The Descendants of Mike and Phoebe, and they have an album that's called A Spirit Speaks, and this is that album. Chick Chick is the name of this track. We just heard a piece from Bruce Langhorne's score to the motion picture The Hired Hand, Bruce Langhorne being one of Bob Dylan's session guitarists, and The Hired Hand being a Peter Fonda flick, Peter Fonda's first flick, and Bruce Langhorne's only OST. That's original soundtrack, folks. And before that, what did we hear from? We heard from Kenny Graham and his Afro-Cubists, a track called Bongo Chant. We heard from Dick Rajmakers, a track called Contrasts off of the Boddings and Rajmakers electronic music collection. And we heard from the BD himself, that's Bob Dylan, doing an old SG track, that's Simon and Garfunkel. That was The Boxer off of Bob Dylan's self-portrait.
Love BD, love SG. I love when people know somebody so well, and when the country knows someone so well, you don't even have to say anything other than the person's initials, and they know exactly what artist you're talking about.
Absolutely, and so BG, we focus on the golden age of music, 1969, the Summer of Love, and Bob Dylan, he was out preceding that in the Greenwich folk clubs, and it's very much something that we're interested in. The popularization of folk music to a point where when Dylan went electric, and the backlash was so immense.
People were not happy about that. They just, Dylan was doing so many great things on the acoustic guitar that when he went electric, it was kind of a shot heard around the world, and everyone knows where they were, of course, when Dylan went electric, and of course he's never turned back. He's stayed electric his whole career, never picked up an acoustic guitar again, somehow, and has continued to rock out with all the biggest rock bands since then, and oh gosh, Dylan, such a catalog, so many records, hundreds and hundreds of records, thousands upon thousands of songs. One of the greatest songbooks in American history. And on a day of independence like tomorrow coming up, don't forget about Dylan. Put it in one of his electrics, and maybe, throw it on one of his early acoustic works.
And, everyone remembers where they were when Dylan played the Royal Albert Hall across the pond in the UK, and they tried to Brexit him off the stage. He was going electric, and they were booing him, they were throwing apples at him, and he just kind of plowed through with some, shredding of his own, in his own Dylan-esque way, and he's got such a interesting style, and there's a lot of imitators, but there's only one Bob Dylan. We've got to celebrate our national treasures. He's one of America's sweethearts, for sure, but also one of America's enigmas. And let's switch gears from BG over to SG, and that's Simon Garfunkel. You've got Paul Simon, Art Garfunkel. These guys did Bridge Over Troubled Water. They did The Boxer, which we heard, and that was BD covering SG. Of course, Art Garfunkel, Paul Simon famously split. There's animosity that continues to this day, not unlike...
They're not friends anymore?
Oh, not at all.
Oh,
no,
gosh, did not know about this. That's a real disappointment to me. I always thought they were best buds, and I always considered them to be best of friends, and that's kind of a shame to hear that. And I wish you guys would get back together and start making some good songs again. So, did you select an American-themed song from these guys, or was it...
Well, it would have been very appropriate to play the Paul Simon track "America,"
yes.
But we did not do that.
Okay.
Now we still could, but that's a little too on the nose. I know there's a lot of these shows. You're going to get a lot of these Independence Day kind of programming where songs with America in the titles, and we're just not going to fall. We're not going to play that game. We're going to celebrate the people, because that's really what makes this country. It's the people.
We the people.
Absolutely, the Mavericks, the originals, like BG. And like this group, the Descendants of Mike and Phoebe, a very unknown group, But the wonders of capitalism and the internet have resulted in a marketplace where a record such as this will sell for hundreds of dollars to the highest bidder, and that's really what America's all about.
And of course, those original artists never see a dime of that, and they never saw a dime of that, and that's kind of what America's all about: making money off of someone else's hard work and making a business out of it. Now, am I being sarcastic? Yes, a little bit. Because these people deserve mention, and that's why we are here to mention them and give them that small part of the spotlight that they never got. The Descendants of Mike and Phoebe. I've always had a question about this band, Chris. Descendants of Mike and Phoebe, were they? So these are people named Mike and Phoebe, or are these people that are the descendants of Mike and Phoebe?
It's anybody's guess. There's certainly not a lot of major motion pictures made about this group, like Bob Dylan, for example.
Sure.
And we all know that No Direction Home, for example.
Sure.
Some of these other films that are out there about the great Bob Dylan. These filmmakers have not tackled the Descendants of Mike and Phoebe, a group that put out one album, which stacks against Dylan's vast catalog, which we've already touched on. It's just apples and oranges. We've got a very unknown group, and then
it's apples and oranges, but it does stack
Ben,
up against it.
let me just interrupt you. I just don't think it's an apt comparison to draw between the Descendants of Mike and Phoebe and the great Bob Dylan.
Oh, yeah, I'm not. You're the one that made it. So.
Well, I do not appreciate the implication there.
Okay.
So we'll just move on. This is Flanger Magazine. We're going to get back to the music. Check us out online, WXOX at www.artxfm.com, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Flanger Magazine, where you're going to get our takes on some of the nation's most pressing matters and hot button issues. That's really what we're all about here. Stay tuned. Happy to have you with us here on this fine Sunday. 3:01 p.m. and you're listening to WXOX LP Louisville. This is Flanger Magazine. We got a track right now from Bernard Fevre. How are we doing, Ben? It's the top of the 3 o'clock hour, and we got one more hour left. How are we feeling at this halfway point?
I feel great about the fact that we got the green light for the second hour. The conspiracy theories we've been throwing around, it really had me worried that we were going to get thrown out of the studio again. For the first time. I keep thinking it's going to happen, but we prevailed once again, and because of the power of our listeners and how you guys rose up again to defend us, it's helped out a lot, and I want to say thank you to all our listeners.
I also want to say thank you to all our listeners, and it's a tightrope act, navigating some of these hot button issues and not taking any official stances on any of them, but nevertheless tackling them down to the ground. And we talked about, we touched on some pretty hot stuff. The NRA's campaign to remove Katie Couric from her position at Yahoo. We came out on the side of Katie Couric.
We came very close to taking a side on that one. Of course, it didn't seem to be that we took Katie's side, and of course we do. We support her, and we support her future. And with the Brexit earlier, we kind of took a side on that as well. And so, no, we're not being as partisan as maybe some newscasters will be. We nevertheless are going to give you all the facts.
All the facts, and fair and balanced. And, of course, how can you rule against or decide against one of America's sweethearts, Katie Couric? And which brings us to, we here at Flanger Magazine, I think we're above the idea of celebrity. But then again, there are some of those special someones that just come along every now and then, and they are celebrities, and we're fascinated by them. One being Gary Sinise, the great actor, philanthropist, and musician in the Lieutenant Dan Band. We do want to wish Gary Sinise and the Gary Sinise Foundation a happy 5th anniversary here today on today's show.
Happy 5th anniversary to the Gary Sinise Foundation. Thank you, Gary Sinise, for all the work you do with the Lieutenant Dan Band and with your foundation. And I just want to say I can't wait to see you in another blockbuster film. You're one of the greats.
Absolutely, and if anybody's out there has plans on this 4th of July weekend to go see the Lieutenant Dan Band, very jealous of that opportunity, and we hope you write to us on Facebook and let us know your experience, because that's just one of those bands that are on the top of my list, Ben.
And, of course, we've never played the Lieutenant Dan Band on our show, and we're going to keep it that way, because we like to keep our movie stars and our music separate at all times. Sometimes we will, of course, play from soundtracks, but in the case of someone like Clint Eastwood, now, have we made a rule for someone like Clint Eastwood, a guy that stars in his films and also does the acoustic guitar soundtracks for his films? Now, could we make an exception for a Clint Eastwood soundtrack?
Then I think we probably could make an exception for the great Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry. Everybody's seems to like Clint Eastwood and recognize him as one of the true mavericks out there operating in American filmmaking.
Yes.
And I think our listeners would be disappointed if we didn't make an exception for the great Clint Eastwood. So we'll officially go on record and grant an exception.
We're going to give the green light to Clint Eastwood. Now we're just going to have
and
to.
I think
we
we're
don't
gonna go,
have any of his
we're gonna
records.
Go, we're going to go a step further and grant an exception to the Gorillaz track, Clint Eastwood, by the band Gorillaz. A truly awful song.
Yes.
And definitely worthy of many repeat slams in the garbage, perhaps. But
now that's a
named
song
after
from
a true icon.
That's the song from about the year 2000. Now, just a moment ago, we heard a song from a band that hadn't been around since the year 2000. Of course, that's the Avalanches. Now, the Avalanches are back. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means there's a whole new album. They're going on tour. Who knows? But the Avalanches are back, and you just heard one of their songs. And what was the name of that track?
That was Colors off of their new album Wildflower. And every now and then Flanger Magazine, we do focus on the golden era of rock and roll, the summer of love, the late 60s, the early 70s. But every now and then, some new song from the current year, 2016, gets into our old man heads. And we're up with the most current of radio programs, and you never know what that song might be. We for example, even the venerable Radiohead, we refuse to play any of their new album, while we will at the same time talk about the album and the band at length on the show.
Radiohead is a hot button issue for some people because, but we sort of avoid all the problems with them because we don't play their music. We just discuss and really criticize them. We cut pretty deep with those guys. I mean, we go pretty far back with them in our histories, and we understand them inside and out. And it's one thing to talk about a band. It's another thing to listen to them play music. And sometimes a band is interesting, but they're just so god awful you can't listen to them.
Well, Ben, I think it might be time for another Radiohead challenge, and I'm going to pose this Radiohead challenge to you live on air today. And this is the challenge that I'd like you to tackle. I'd like you
Heart
to
is racing.
Name every Radiohead album in reverse chronological order, beginning with their most recent album and going all the way to their first album.
Okay, here we go, folks. So now this is a challenge you might have heard before, where we went from the first album up to the most current, and
that was a chronological challenge.
This is a reverse chronological challenge, and here we go. Start the clock.
Hold on, let me put on the music for this segment.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible so we can get this music done with.
This is the Gorillaz Clint Eastwood playing during the Radiohead reverse chronological album challenge.
Okay, well, here we go. There was a moon-shaped pool, okay? Then we had the King of Limbs. And then we got, golly, this music is really messing with my concentration. I said the King of Limbs, and then before that there was In Rainbows. Okay. In Rainbows, and then before that, Hail to the Thief. Before that, Amnesiac. Then I'm going to say Kid A. Then I'm going to go OK Computer, Pablo Honey.
Oh, you missed the bends. You skipped the bends, and
boy.
you lose. You lose the reverse Radiohead challenge. There might be profanity in that song. We probably shouldn't play that.
Yeah. I did miss out on the bends. That music was really throwing me for a loop. Sometimes when you're naming Radiohead albums, you just gotta tune everything else out and just focus on your knowledge of the albums. And I won't make that mistake next time.
All right. Well, this is Flanger Magazine on WXOXLP. We're gonna get back to the music. Happy to have everybody with us here on this fine Sunday, July 3rd, 2016. And the Louisville Independent Business Alliance presents the first ever South Points Buy Local Fair, Saturday, July 9th from 4 to 8 p.m. at Iroquois Amphitheater in Louisville. The Louisville Independent businesses will be featured along with live music, an international food court, craft beer, and much, much more. For more information, visit keeplouisvilleweird.com. And Ben, that's something we're always trying to do here on Flanger Magazine. Just keep Louisville as weird as possible. We want to keep Louisville moderately weird. We want to contribute to the community of conspiracy theorists locally, and fringe musicians, and basically anyone who might have a tinfoil hat in their possession.
Yes, and as a Louisville supporter of all the weirdos out there, you just gotta make sure that you stock up on tinfoil, because tinfoil is one of the first things to go in the event of upcoming sort of apocalypse or apocalyptic event. You want to have as much tinfoil as you can. You got to keep that head covered at all times, and make sure the government is not listening to your thoughts
or controlling your thoughts, Ben. That's a big concern for a lot of our conspirators out there. Oh, and I shouldn't say conspirators, because there's certainly no conspiracy that we're a part of. We're all about learning of other conspiracies, Ben, and mostly government conspiracies.
And it's really, the government's one of the best at keeping those under wraps, and that's, most conspiracies that aren't by the government, we usually figure them out pretty quick. The farm to table movement was something we tackled, I think, last week.
That's right.
We got underneath that. I guess you call it a conspiracy, and we move from one thing to another. And once we tackle an issue, it's kind of dead. It's dead in the water, and it's on to the next conspiracy. And it's exciting to hear about new conspiracies. And if anybody has one that we haven't tackled yet, make sure get at us on Facebook and let us know who's controlling our thoughts this week and what to do about it.
Now, Facebook, in our page there, it's I would call it a safe place, but then again, it's not a safe place, because it's a public forum, and Mr. Zuckerberg, he might be part of an Illuminati conspiracy, one of your Garden Mill Illuminati conspiracies.
Yes, the Rosenbergs and all the high power families. And it's really tough to keep up with each new generation and how they think of these groups. But the truth is that we're all under control by them, and you just gotta sort of let that go, accept it, and move on with your life. But of course, always stock up on aluminum foil.
All right. Well, we've got another half hour or so on today's Flanger Magazine, and boy, we're so happy to have everybody out there in Radio Land listening in. And we've got a track right now from the one and only Peter Walker. This is a track off his album Rainy Day Raga. And boy, Ben, we haven't touched on the weather, but it's a little rainy out there, so what an appropriate song and album to play from.
I just wanted to tip my hat to you. You got that right. It's a bit drizzly out, and so make sure to bring your raincoat, bring your poncho. Don't forget your umbrella, because if you're driving out there, and if you're driving on 264, 64 west,
I-65 eastbound, or no, that's a north-south road. Yeah. So let's go with I-65 south.
Yeah, don't be going eastbound on I-65. You're going to be in trouble there. But if you do, make sure those windshield wipers.
That was a good one, Ben. You certainly will.
Thank you very much. I caught that quickly. But make sure your windshield wipers are in good shape, and that they can go up and down the way that they are supposed to. You're going to want to be able to see the road. Now, I just hope that the rain settles down for tomorrow, for the fireworks. There's one thing that just doesn't work very well with water, and that's fire. Yeah, these are just two things that sort of cancel each other out, and the fireworks are not going to be as fun to watch when they're all wet and not able to occur.
And it would be just a national shame if a lot of the backyard grillers out there who are flipping their burgers on the 4th had to go inside, maybe go into the covered areas in the backyard, or maybe even I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
You'd say they'd have to go inside. They'd have to
put
their hot dogs
inside
in the microwave, and there's just something that's not as festive about putting your
the flavor is just not as good.
No, you're not going to get that char flavor, and just spending the day inside on the 4th of July just doesn't seem right. Of course, our forefathers fought for this great country from the British, and of course that didn't happen indoors. That happened outdoors, and we got to experience the great outdoors to experience that one in a lifetime historical event that happens every year.
You can't spend your holiday weekend binge watching online content.
No.
I know that would be a disgrace to what our founding fathers won and our separation from England. That's what the colonists they might have wanted, and I'm not talking about just the British colonists, Ben. I'm talking about any colonist who's trying to essentially prevent and control the masses from uprise. And I think binge watching is certainly a phenomena that just plays into the hands of the powers that be, Ben, and the status quo. So if you're out there enjoying your independence, let's put your
tinfoil hats on, and if you're gonna
get outdoors.
Get outdoors, though, and of course, if you have leftovers, make sure to use that extra aluminum to wrap up those burgers and dogs. They make a good lunch for Tuesday afternoon, and share them with your family, share them with your extended friends, and that's what the Independence Day is all about. Is making it on your own with lots of herbs and spices.
Wow, and what a driveway moment this has been on this segment. That's really what we're all about here, is just trying to create those driveway moments. You're out there on the 3rd of July, and you're out there going to Kroger or whatever local grocery store, and we're certainly not advertising in any way. We're just mentioning the local stores, okay?
Okay, could have been Kroger, could have been Value Market, could have been any of the fine...
Could have been Walmart.
Could have been Walmart, sure. Sam's Club, could have been Meijer.
And you could have been you could have been at the Meijer on Hurstbourne Road, or you could have been the Meijer all the way out there by Tinseltown Theaters. You could have been the Kroger on Bardstown Road, or maybe in Germantown on Goss Avenue by Eastern Parkway. It doesn't matter, folks, and all we're saying is we're just trying to create these driveway moments. You're coming home from the store, and you're in that driveway, and you just can't turn off the radio, and that's what we put the volunteer hours in for. That's what we're trying to do here in Flanger Magazine, and we hope you're enjoying yourself on this 3rd of July. That's the bottom ultimate point. It's just about having fun and appreciating your freedom and independence.
And
in this
these
great country.
Stories that you come up with are always they always blow my mind, and I'm always on the edge of my seat as you talk about the different stores and roads that you know about here in Louisville. I'm always sort of thrown back, and listeners, he's not looking at a map. He's just coming up with these plays at the top of his head. He's got an encyclopedic memory. Everything he sees or does, it's stored up there in a steel trap. Chris, congratulations on your ability to just riff off stories about the city of Louisville and what we're all about here. I know our listeners appreciate it, and I do as well.
Well, our local roadways do have a lot of stories to tell, and sometimes you've got to just reflect back on a I-264 eastbound stretch of roadway, for example. And our listeners out there who are listening in their cars, maybe you're on I-64 north, or that's an east-west. There we go again. All right, we're going to get back to it.
And one day, I got my chance, and I grabbed it where it counts. And that's how I got to be... Mr. This ain't no fairy tale. Empty hands, empty pockets, that's not my style. What do you need? You don't know? Well, I'm going to tell you what you need. To begin with, I'm going to tell you what the land of freedom's all about. No, you're not dreaming, because that land exists. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been living like pigs.
3:40 p.m. and you're listening to Flanger Magazine on WXOXLP Louisville. We're happy to have you with us here on this fine Sunday. We're about out of here, and then you've got the one and only Cat Casual coming up next, so stay tuned for that. Always a great show and a great time on a great radio station in a great country, and that's really what it's all about, Ben. 4th of July.
4th of July, patriotism, hot dogs, fireworks, taking your dog out for a walk, and firecrackers, snake bombs, and all the other cherry things. It's a lot of fun on the 4th of July, and what it's all about is celebrating the year 1776 and the 4th of July on that year when so many of our soldiers made a contribution to the founding of this country, and what a country it's been so far. Of course, like you said earlier, it's a young country. We're still trying to figure ourselves out. Of course, we're not having to Brexit or do anything strange like that, but we do have a lot of.
We've got a lot to show for ourselves. We invented jazz and the internet, and just those two things on their own would be enough for a country.
Most countries, but no, we didn't stop there.
We didn't stop there. We invented the automobile.
Yeah.
We invented the telephone. And it just doesn't stop there. Red, white, and blue, all today. And no, we're not talking about the French flag. We're talking about the Stars and Stripes, the Stars and Bars, as they call them. It's our country. There's 50 states. We've also got some territories.
You love it or leave it.
And if you've got your right to vote, you better exercise that right to vote. There's no voting on the 4th of July, just celebrating a great day, a great country. We stopped Britain dead in their tracks, and they haven't tried it again.
They had us on their ropes, but like you said, they haven't tried again, and they probably won't try anytime soon. They're out on their lonesome now. Of course, this is when we say we should make our move and attack, but these are just our views and not views of the station or of.
And they're not really our views.
They're not really views either. They're kind of jokes. But it does. Just when you're joking, sometimes there is a grain of truth there too.
Absolutely. And everybody out there who's really, people are mostly happy to have a day off work tomorrow, and that's where most people fall. And now, if you've always got Mondays off somehow, then it's not really a big deal for you because you've always got Mondays off.
And you might be thinking, well, shouldn't we get Tuesday off too because everyone else got a day off, and it's not really fair. And we're on your side there. If that's the kind of job you've got where you normally have Mondays off, but now they're not giving you an extra day off for Tuesday when everyone else got a day off. I mean, we're on your side. Write us on Facebook, and we're gonna join you in your quest to get that Tuesday off.
Or write your local senator or congressman. If you feel like you are always off on Mondays and you should get July 5th off because it's only fair, that's the kind of thing that can be put up on a referendum. And you can contact your local congressman or senator to make that request a law. And all of a sudden, you've got Tuesday, July 5th off, and you've got July 4th off. That's a Monday.
This is what countries like France have done for so long, to the point where there's only 70 working days in the year, and that's all you gotta do is get people together and strike. And now
there'll be special interests that don't want you to take that Tuesday off, and that's where you're really gonna have to start your grassroots organization for that July 5th holiday, because you always are off on Mondays, and you want that Tuesday off. Now, you could always take a vacation day, but maybe your employer doesn't allow a vacation day because it's not a requirement.
It has to be 2 days apart from a holiday, or there's some other fine print that you didn't read. Well, we're here to say, take it back. Take back your extra day. We're on your side with this, and if you need a shoulder to cry on, we're here every Sunday from 2 to 4. So you might have to wait till next week, but of course, just know that we're there in spirit and in
This is the information age. This is the and we're an information economy, and you shouldn't have to work days you don't want to work. And I think that's just fair. That's what's fair is fair, Ben. And I think that our founders would agree with that. If you're working on Tuesday and you normally have Mondays off, I think you should have that Tuesday off. And the only way to do that is through the legislative process.
Now, of course, going back to 1776, our founders had 6-day work weeks, and everybody worked 6 days. Of course, there's never been a 7-day work week. Sunday's always been the day of rest. But through a lot of fighting, through a lot of protests, we got down to that 5-day work week, and our unions and our fellow bureaucrats and so forth, we did it, and we got it down to 5. Let's see if we can get it down to 2. I think that's a worthy goal for this generation and the next. Get it down to 2 work days a week, and maybe make it mandatory so that nobody can work more than 2 days. I mean, that sounds like fun, huh?
That sounds like a fun time, and of course, a lot of the other businesses would love that because they'd all of a sudden have people who aren't working, and they can go out to eat.
Yeah,
they can go out to the movies, and of course, those businesses would have to be open,
yes,
7 days a week as they are now.
Yeah,
but maybe they would hire some more people, and each of those individuals would work 2 days a week at those movie theaters and restaurants.
We're not economists, and these are these are but some new ideas that we've read from place to place, and some people they tear them down right away. They say that would never work, and then they give a lot of reasons why. We're not going to do that. We're just going to talk about dreams. This is about dreaming.
And this country is a laboratory for democracy and new ideas, and the states are laboratories for innovation. And there's a 2-day work week that is passed into law. Let's give it a shot. And I think this is our only shot at this because, these ideas, there's just going to be another idea and somebody's going to have a different law, and they're just going to lose track of the great 2-day work week proposal.
I'm sure this 2-day work week proposal has sort of created a driveway moment for you. I know I've been stuck to my seat to hear the rest of the story, and it's sort of wrapped itself up. I don't know if we have anywhere else to go with it. I can't wait till next week. It's not going to be a holiday weekend, but it is going to be, of course, the middle of July, and there's so much to talk about in July. We're just going to have to wait to see what there will be to talk about. All the news stories, all the we'll see where Couric is. Maybe she's made another jump. Gary Sinise and what he's up to. There's always news, and that's what we love to bring you.
It's Christmas in July over here. It surely is. And if you're in your driveway right now, you can go on inside because we're wrapping it up here over at Flanger Magazine. And this driveway moment's over. We'll have more driveway moments next week on our show, starting at 2 p.m. and then driveway moment after driveway moment, all the way up until 4 p.m. And that's just all we can do for our appreciation for our listeners and our audience. Happy to have you with us on this July 3rd. Flanger Magazine. We'll see you next week.